The first sound wasn't her scream. It was the crack of Sophie Rowan's skull against polished marble. And while blood slid into her hair and the room blurred around her, Damian Vane stared down at his pregnant wife with the cold, irritated face of a man already deciding how to call attempted murder an accident. Tap like if you've ever seen someone rich think they could rename violence and make it disappear. 10 seconds earlier, Sophie had still been standing, still breathing hard, still holding the unsigned papers he had pushed at her for 8 straight nights, still telling herself that if she stayed calm, if she chose the right words, maybe this version of Damian would pass like the others. But it didn't. The study overlooked the city in black glass and rain. A fire burned low behind them. His merger documents were spread across the desk like they belonged to both of them, though Sophie had understood for days now that her signature was not about marriage, not about protection, not about the baby. It was about timing, control, something he needed before someone else moved first. "I'm not signing blind," she had said. That was enough. Damian's face changed in the quietest way possible. No yelling, no wildness, just the expression of a man closing a door inside himself. "You were a waitress 6 years ago," he said softly. "Do not confuse your current address with actual power." Sophie felt the baby move and instinctively placed one hand over her stomach. "Then explain the papers." "I already did." "No, you explained around them." For 1 second, his eyes froze. Then he stepped forward, and she stepped back, and the heel of her slipper caught the edge of the stair runner near the split-level landing outside the study. She never knew whether he meant to hit her first or shove her. She only remembered the impact. His hand, her shoulder, the sudden loss of balance, the world tilting sideways. Then marble. A white flash detonated through her head. Her vision shattered into light and shadow. She heard herself make a broken sound that did not even feel human. Warmth ran behind her ear. The baby. Her whole body locked around that one thought. The baby. She tried to curl around her stomach, but nausea surged so hard she nearly blacked out. Somewhere above her, Damian exhaled once, long and controlled, like a trader recalculating after a bad market swing. Then he crouched beside her. "Sophie," he said, not with fear, with annoyance. She forced one eye open. The ceiling swam. His cufflink flashed gold in the light. "You did that," she whispered. He actually looked offended. "No," he said, "you slipped." A housemaid had appeared at the far end of the corridor, one hand over her mouth. Damian turned his head, and his voice became instantly sharp. "You saw her lose balance." The maid didn't answer. He stood. "Call Dr. Feld, not emergency services, and nobody contacts the press, building staff, or police unless it goes through me." Sophie's fingers clawed weakly at the carpet edge. Not emergency services. That cut through the fog harder than the fall had. He wasn't panicking. He was managing. Blood reached her collarbone in a thin, hot line. She tried to push herself up and nearly vomited from the pain. Damian looked down at her like she was suddenly inconvenient, then leaned close enough for only her to hear. "You should have signed when I was being patient." He straightened and pulled out his phone. That was when the house lights shifted. Not off, not fully, just one brief flicker across the hall, followed by the muted chirp of the front gate override. Damian frowned. A second later, footsteps sounded from downstairs. Fast. Too many. Not house staff. His head of security appeared at the bottom of the staircase, pale in a way Sophie had never seen before. "Sir," he said. Damian did not move. "What?" The man swallowed. "The gates were opened from an external master channel." "That's impossible." "No, sir." His voice dropped lower. "They're already here." Through the tall entry glass below, Black sedans rolled into the circular drive one by one, silent as a verdict. Men in dark coats stepped out with the kind of calm that did not belong to police, paparazzi, or anyone Damian had paid. For the first time that night, Sophie saw uncertainty hit his face. Then one of the men looked up the staircase, saw the blood in her hair, and touched a hand to his earpiece. "Move now," he said. Damian turned toward the foyer just as the front doors opened, and the silver-haired man who entered did not look at him first. He looked at Sophie on the marble. Then he said, in a voice so controlled it made the whole house go still, Rowan wants his daughter taken out alive." Everything after that happened too fast for Damian and too slowly for Sophie. The silver-haired man crossed the foyer with 3 others behind him, and none of them wasted a single movement. Not one shout, not one threat, just immediate control. One went to Sophie, one blocked the staircase, one relieved Damian's head of security of his phone so smoothly it looked rehearsed. Damian finally found his voice. "Who the hell do you think you are?" The older man ignored him and dropped to one knee beside Sophie. Up close, his face was severe, expensive, and completely stripped of performance. He took in the blood at her temple, the pupils, the angle of her neck, the hand still curled protectively over her stomach. Then he said, very gently, "Sophie, can you hear me?" She tried to answer. Pain split the effort apart. A female medic rushed in with a compact trauma kit. "Possible skull fracture," she said. "Pregnancy risk. We move now." Damian came down 2 steps. "Nobody is taking my wife anywhere." The older man rose slowly and turned to face him. "Your wife was found bleeding at the top of a staircase while you instructed staff to call it a fall. You no longer control what happens next." Damian's expression hardened. "Name." "Gabriel Shaw." That meant nothing to Sophie. The next sentence did. "I represent Rowan." The room tilted harder than the concussion already had. Rowan. She had not heard that name spoken out loud in years, not without bitterness. Her mother had used it like a wound. The man who left. The man who chose empire over family. The man whose last name Sophie had stopped saying out loud before she turned 15. Damian saw the recognition hit her and reacted too fast. "Don't fill her head with nonsense while she's concussed." Gabriel's eyes went flat. "Interesting. You're worried about her head now." That landed hard. The maid by the wall started crying silently. Damian noticed and snapped, "Pull yourself together." Gabriel didn't even look at her. "She won't need to. We already copied the internal logs, the call records, and the first version of your instructions." For the first time, real alarm flickered across Damian's face. Sophie saw it and understood something through the pain. This had not been a random rescue. These men had arrived ready to take the house apart before he could clean it. The medic slipped fingers lightly along Sophie's scalp, then looked up. "We need imaging within 20 minutes. 2 men brought in a transport chair. Another handed Gabriel a phone. He listened for 3 seconds, then said, "Keep the physician downstairs. He doesn't leave until legal speaks to him." Damian took 1 step forward. "You think you can walk into my home and dictate terms?" Gabriel answered without raising his voice. "No, I know I can." They lifted Sophie carefully. The motion made black sparks burst behind her eyes. She gripped the armrest with one hand and her stomach with the other, waiting for the baby, begging for movement. Nothing. Panic rose cold and fast. The medic saw it immediately. "Stay with me. Stress can delay movement. Breathe." As they rolled her toward the doors, Damian followed alongside, still trying to rebuild the scene with words. "Sophie, listen to me. You fell. You were dizzy. We talked about this." She turned her head just enough to look at him. Blood had dried behind her ear. Her vision doubled. But even through the blur, his face was unmistakable now. Not worried, not sorry, working. She forced out 2 words through the pain. "You lied." He smiled then, small and private and vicious. "Only better than you." Gabriel stopped so abruptly the entire hallway froze. He turned back once, and when he spoke, every servant in the house heard it. "By morning," he said, "your phones will be forensically copied, your doctor will be under statement, your stairwell will be measured, and every camera you altered will be reconstructed. So enjoy the next few hours, Mr. Vane. They are the last ones you spend ahead of this story." Outside, the black sedans waited under cold rain. As Sophie was loaded into the lead vehicle, she felt it at last. A small kick, tiny, alive. Tears filled her eyes. Gabriel shut the door, got in across from her, and as the convoy pulled away from the estate, he said the one thing that made the whole night turn into something even bigger than fear. "Your father is on his way. And when Rowan gets here, this stops being an accident." Rowan did not enter the recovery suite like a father returning. He entered like a man arriving at the scene of a theft that had lasted 28 years. Sophie was propped against white pillows, one side of her head wrapped, the room dimmed against the concussion, her body still trembling now and then from shock. The baby was stable for the moment. Her nausea wasn't. Every sound felt too sharp. Every light carried an edge. When Rowan stepped through the door, she knew him at once. Not because she remembered him, because power leaves a shape. Tall, controlled, gray at the temples. Expensive without trying. The kind of man who looked like he had spent his life making decisions other people survived or didn't. Gabriel moved aside for him. No one announced him. No one had to. Rowan stopped beside the bed and looked at her bandaged head, then at the bruising beginning to spread down her shoulder. For 1 second, something broke in his face. Then it was gone. "Sophie," he said quietly. She swallowed against the pain in her throat. "You're real." It wasn't the question she meant to ask. It was the one that came out. Rowan took the hit of it without flinching. "Yes." Her fingers tightened in the blanket. "My mother said you left." "I was made to disappear from your life before I even understood how completely." His voice stayed low, but there was iron under it. "During the first succession war at Rowan Industrial, people close to my board buried paternity filings, bought judges, paid intermediaries, and kept your mother moving long enough to make it look voluntary. By the time I cut through it, you were already gone under another name." Sophie stared at him. All those cheap apartments, all those late rent notices, all those years of hearing that she had simply not been worth staying for. Gabriel placed a folder on the side table. Inside were photographs. Sophie at 16 outside a grocery store. Sophie leaving a diner in a stained apron. Sophie carrying takeout up icy apartment steps years before Damian entered her life. Rowan saw her face change. "I watched from distance once I found the trail again. Not because I didn't want to come closer. Because every time I pushed directly, someone pushed back harder." Sophie's voice came out thin. "And Damian?" That changed the room. Rowan didn't answer immediately. Gabriel did. "He found the same hidden trail through a legal discrepancy tied to your birth records. Once he knew whose daughter you were, the marriage made strategic sense." Sophie closed her eyes. There it was. The ugliest truth. Not romance, not rescue, strategy. Roman opened a second file. Trust maps, voting structures, merger blocks. Her name. The baby's projected beneficiary status. Damian's company intersecting with Rowan-controlled holdings in ways that made the whole marriage suddenly look like a financial weapon. "He needed your signature before quarter close," Rowan said. "Once the child was born, he had an even stronger route into protected family control. You weren't his wife in that system. You were access." The door opened again. Tessa Hall, Rowan's chief legal strategist, came in with a tablet and a look that meant good news for everyone except Damian. "We have the stairwell reconstruction," she said. "Impact pattern disproves a slip. Blood spatter places him above her at the time of first contact. The maid is understatement, and the private physician admitted he was instructed to describe the injuries as pregnancy-related dizziness unless imaging contradicted it." Sophie looked from Tessa to Roman. "You did all that tonight?" Roman met her eyes. "The second your distress monitor went dark inside his house." She frowned. "Distress monitor?" Gabriel answered. "The bracelet he made you wear for pregnancy wellness, pinged through a duplicated shadow channel we embedded after confirming you were his target. When the signal vanished for 42 seconds and came back from the stairwell, we moved." That hit almost as hard as the truth about Damian. The black cars, the silence, the speed. Not magic, preparation. Tessa set down another tablet. Kessler Foundation Emergency Leadership Dinner. Press confirmed. Donors attending. Statement expected from Damian Vane. "He's going public tomorrow night," she said. "He's going to perform concern, call it a fall, and wrap the whole thing in husband of the year language." Roman's expression went cold enough to lower the room's temperature. "Good," he said. Sophie looked at him. "Good?" "Yes." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Because men like him only believe consequences are real when they arrive in the room they built for applause. He stepped closer to the bed then, not as CEO, not as myth, but as the father she had been taught to hate and had never been allowed to know. "I cannot give you back the years before this," he said, "but I can make sure the next thing he hears after he lies is the truth." Outside the windows, 3 black sedans sat motionless under the rain. This time they did not feel mysterious. They felt final. Damian Vane stepped onto the stage at 8:11 p.m. wearing a black tuxedo and the expression of a man who believed money could still edit reality. The emergency leadership dinner glittered with crystal, cameras, donors, and the kind of polished silence powerful men mistake for loyalty. Behind him, the Rowan-Vane merger logo rotated across enormous screens. In front of him sat investors, reporters, board members, and every social predator who had ever applauded a man for sounding calm while other people bled for him. He lowered his head and began. "My wife suffered a tragic fall during a difficult private moment related to her pregnancy. She is receiving care. I ask for dignity, compassion, and restraint while our family moves through this painful time." Then Sophie walked in. Bandaging still disappeared into her hairline. A pale bruise darkened the side of her face. Her movements were careful but not weak. She wore a simple dark dress, one hand resting low over her stomach, and the entire room changed the moment people saw her. Alive. Not hidden. Not sedated. Not under his version of the story. Damian stopped speaking for half a second. That was the first real crack. Sophie reached the foot of the stage and looked up at him. "You called attempted murder a fall." No one in the ballroom moved. Damian recovered fast, but not fast enough. "Sophie, you are confused. You should not even be here." "Roll it," Rowan said. He entered from the side aisle with Gabriel and Tessa behind him, and the room erupted. Chairs scraped. Reporters rose. One board member actually took a step backward like the temperature had changed around him. The screens behind Damian went black. Then the stairwell reconstruction appeared. Blood pattern, impact angle, trajectory analysis. A clean forensic breakdown proving Sophie had not slipped downward alone, but had been struck and driven into marble from above. Gasps tore across the room. Then came the estate footage gap report. Then the maid's statement. Then the private physician's recorded admission. "I was told to describe the injuries as pregnancy instability unless imaging forced another explanation." Damian's face drained. The next file hit harder. A private recording from 3 weeks earlier. Damian in his study, voice low, certain, contemptuous. "Once the child is born, Her name gives me a clean route into Rowan control." This time the ballroom didn't murmur. It recoiled. Damian pointed toward the screens with a shaking hand. "This is stolen, manipulated, manufactured by a man trying to buy a daughter he abandoned." Roman climbed the stage slowly, not speaking until he stood in full light beside Sophie. "My daughter was hidden from me," he said. "You found that before she did. You married her for access. You used her pregnancy as leverage. And when she would not sign, you tried to turn her skull fracture into paperwork." The silence after that was devastating. Damian finally lost the last of his polish. "She was nobody before me." Sophie didn't blink. "No," she said. "I was someone you thought nobody would come for." That finished him. He came off the stage too fast, rage tearing through the performance, and Gabriel was already moving. Detectives closed in from both sides of the ballroom with uniformed officers right behind them. "Damian Vane," one detective said, "you are under arrest for aggravated assault, attempted murder, coercive fraud, witness tampering, and conspiracy-related financial offenses." He fought, of course. Men like him always do when the room stops being theirs. But the cuffs closed anyway. Cameras flashed so hard the chandeliers seemed to flicker. Donors stared. Board members looked away from him and toward Roman with the stunned expression of people recalculating their loyalties in real time. As officers turned Damian toward the exit, he twisted back to Sophie one last time. "You'll regret this." She held his stare without a trace of fear. "You should have regretted the first step toward that staircase." They took him out under crystal light and public silence, the only punishment he had ever truly believed in. Weeks later, Sophie stood on the terrace of a quiet house overlooking the water while winter finally began to break. The merger was dead. Damian's empire was under investigation. The criminal case was moving. Her baby was safe. Her headaches were fading. Roman was still there, not in shadows, not through files, but in person. He stood beside her for a long moment before saying, "I can't return what was taken from you." Sophie rested a hand over her child and looked out at the light on the water. "No," she said, "but you came before I disappeared." Roman bowed his head once, and for the first time in her life, Sophie understood the black cars, the silence, the sudden force that had torn through Damian's lies in a single night. It wasn't mystery. It was what happened when the truth finally arrived with power behind it.